Hi, and welcome to this special episode of Talk Data to Me. I'm Craig Stewart, CEO and founder of Dalebrook Media. And joining me today is Dr. Andy Mabaso, who's the Group CTO at Altron. Now, I'm chatting to Andy because Altron is lead partner of our Data Fest event that's coming up in Cape Town early in November. So great to have their support and great to have Andy chatting to us about all things AI, generative AI, data in general. But before we get into those hot topics, Andy, so great to have you with us. Perhaps you can give some people a bit of insight into who you are and especially maybe around your sort of titles on LinkedIn around AI enthusiast, researcher, chief tinkerer, all these sorts of things. Who is Andy Mabaso?
Craig, yeah, nice to see you again. It's nice to chat to you. So I'm an engineer by training. So I sort of did electrical engineering, but fell in love with the computer science side of things while I was at UCT. I started focusing on that quite a lot. So I've worked as a software engineer for quite a large part of my career. Started off in a logistics environment, actually at Transnet, coding software, control systems, and those type of things, monitoring systems as well. And then sort of made my way through to the banking sector where I was the CIO at Standard Bank. And the really cool thing to see there is that, when you have a really cool skill, it's actually quite transferable across industries.
Yep.
Initially I thought, why is Standard Bank talking to me? I'm in rail and I'm really doing some heavy technical, but really engineering stuff. What does the bank want with me? But it turns out actually, everyone has the same challenges. Everybody wants to figure out security. How do we get to the cloud? How do we use data to monitor our assets? And how do we monetize that data, right? So everyone has exactly the same challenges, and that's how I actually managed to move across various industries. I'm the CTO of Altron. I joined in February, and one of the big parts of my portfolio is data and AI. So one, how do we use the data sets that we have as Altron, to make the lives of our customers better, and then two, how do we offer products, right, in the market that are based in large part on AI technology. And how do we improve the current products that we have in the market, with AI? Yeah, so that's really my role.
Absolutely. Software engineering, something I started studying, but my brain just didn't click that way. But I think it is, as you say, it's a very transferable skill. And I think especially, data science, data, et cetera, from what I'm kind of picking up and have done over the years, is that sort of transferable knowledge and sort of being able to get knowledge from different industries and bring that into the data environment in another organization is super valuable, just because I think it is a very creative sort of environment, right? It's not sort of just this is the box for banking. It's how do you bring those different ideas in? So it sounds like you've kind of walked that journey about being able to build up your skill set and your experience, and then obviously add value now in at Altron.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's about depth, right? I think if you have depth in your experience, then that generally is transferable. I know people try and do the other way around, where you try and have a lot of varied experiences, and that's also a path you could take. But the challenge with that is you then become very general in the way that you're trained, and that almost restricts you in the path that you can follow, right, in your career. So I took the opposite way, which is build a lot of depth, and then figure out how do I then translate that depth to multiple industries. And then in that way, learn those other industries as well. It's a unique way, but I think it's the right way, especially with things like AI now, right?
Yeah.
Like you want people that are business savvy, but at the same time really understand how to use the technology, right? Because those combination of things, right, like we call them T-shaped people, people that understand the business know-how, but really have good technical depth. I think is the future, right? Otherwise, we will not be able to keep up, not only with the tech, but also with all the changing business requirements. The funny thing as well, Craig, is we're starting to see, even in banking, that the person that drives business outcomes and the person that's doing the implementation is often now the same person.
Yeah.
It's super hard. That translation error between, hey, I'm a product owner and I'm going to translate requirements, to an engineer, and then that person's going to build it. Well, that turns out it's way too slow now, right? With LLMs, it's actually easier to code a solution in like a day, and then just throw it out tomorrow and just iterate and just code another one, right? It's so much easier to write your requirements that way, than to, have the normal back and forth, between two people. So we're finding that these T-shaped individuals are really, really key going forward.
Perfect. All right. So there's some good skills development and career advice from Andy, I think, about going deep, making sure you really understand the technical side of things, but then also understand that business so you can add value in the context of what the business problem is that you're looking to solve. And I think it's quite a nice link into the main part of our conversation, Andy, which is really about adopting AI as an organization. Now, we both know that AI has been around for a long time, but now the adoption, the sort of keenness, I suppose, to get it into business is just accelerating, almost J-curve style. What do you think is driving that? Do you think people are now really starting to see the value? The fear is sort of slowly starting to subside, or is there still quite a bit of work to be done to really understand how to get this into business and adding value?
Yeah, I think everything you've said, Craig, is true. I think there's a lot of FOMO that's driving things. People, have a fear of missing out. So, this company has done this. Why are we not doing it? And I think that hype is driving a lot of unreasonable expectations and maybe even timelines. So I think there's a lot of that, a healthy amount of that's going around. At the same time as well, I think organizations are only now starting to figure out what can we really do with this technology. When ChatGPT came out, I think everyone was really impressed. Like, wow, this is amazing. GPT-3 in particular. It was trained on I think that's 3 billion tokens. So its ability to reason, right, just felt magical at the time, right? Like, whoa, what can we do with this? But as people started using it, they realized, actually, it's not so clever, right? Like, what can I actually do with this? And you've seen a lot of people, have Copilot licenses in their organization, then the costs skyrocket. I've had a Copilot license. And by the way, when I say Copilot, I mean a generic technical term, not any specific company's product. And you sort of ask yourself, what do I do with this thing? I'm not really finding too much use outside of helping me write better emails. Okay, that's useful for a day or two, and then I'm fine again. I don't really need it anymore. So I think a lot of people are still in that space. What I found really works for people is to start with yourself. How can I use AI in my personal life? How can I use AI just to improve my workspace, my workflow, etc. So if you think about things like budget forecasting to just automation of routine tasks, I think that's where people can start to dip their toes. I have a friend that's in the art industry, and she just started using AI to help her generate marketing material, right? Because that takes way too much time to do it on your own. Yeah. So I think just starting very small, reducing the expectations, reducing those barriers to entry, where people think they have to have a PhD in AI to be able to use it. That's not true. Just start using it where you are. And I think the more people in the organization that are allowed to explore just for themselves without feeling like there's big brother watching, right? Or there's the IT department that needs to implement something, I think people will get more and more comfortable. Once that happens, an interesting thing actually, starts to occur in the organizations. People go, wait a minute, but if I can do this for my own workflow, couldn't we do this for our department's workflow? Couldn't we do this for, this insights report that I need to put out every single month? Is there a way to do that a lot easier, right? So you almost do the change process as you go along, right? People buy in slowly, and then once they're fully bought in, we find that departments just go in all out, right? Like, guys, we're never taking minutes the same way ever again. We're going to do it this way. But it starts from a very small thing. So that's what I would say, Craig. Start small, start with your own workflow, really figure it out. Don't just go out and buy, hundreds of Copilot licenses from whichever is your favorite provider. Start really small. Let's explore, right? As an exco, as a leadership team, as a developer on the ground, and then see how it improves your life. And then if it does, start to see whether you can expand it in your context a little bit slowly, and then eventually you will have that change, coming through the organization.
So kind of sum up there, you're saying don't force it into, massive processes within the organization as a starting point. Don't disrupt how people work and their sort of fear around the technology, but rather get them to sort of use it in their own personal environment, get very comfortable with it, realize that it's not going to, take over the world in some sort of malicious form, but actually adds a lot of value, and then let that sort of grow up through the business rather than being pushed hard down.
Spot on, spot on.
Awesome. All right, so let's then talk about some key steps, because I think you've sort of talked to a degree there around AI literacy in the organization, which is obviously incredibly important in this environment, making sure people don't understand, I guess, the technical guts of the large language model, but much more around the prompt engineering and all that sort of thing. So that's AI literacy is one of the big steps. What are some of the other key steps you can suggest to organizations as they embark on this journey? What are some of the things that they should look at, potential, pitfalls, obstacles, etc., and what sort of advice can you give them to kind of make it a relatively smooth journey?
Right, right. Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I think there's two things that we've noticed. The first one is prompt engineering. You're right. Data literacy and AI literacy is really low in most organizations. All of us have arithmetic literacy, right? Because we're taught that from, whatever is your earliest schooling memory, right? But none of us really had that until the last maybe 5 years, for most organizations, where they're faced with, having to deal with, with AI and how to apply it in their environment. So prompt engineering is, I call it surfing the maths, right? The way that LLMs work is they represent knowledge in this multi-dimensional space, like 12,000, sort of coordinates in that space to try and entail some kind of meaning to words and objects and the like. And really, if you just have a very generic query, you're really not surfing the maths to a very specific, context, right? You're really leaving it out there. And so you can end up with, very wild results. They make sense in the maths, but it's not really relevant to what you're doing. And we find that because people don't know how to prompt, they get really frustrated with the outcomes of the tools very quickly. And so we're finding that just teaching departments, hey, look, this is how you give it context. This is what we mean by one-shot learning, right? Give it a few examples, and then the AI will quickly, that the maths will quickly reduce to the context that you're talking about, and then it's really easy to get the right results. So just basic tools like that we find are really useful, and then people start to buy in, really well. That's one. The second one is, avoiding this top-down approach. And I know that there are probably risk professionals that are sitting there going, whoa, but risk is going to explode. How are you going to do that? Yeah. But hang on a minute, right? You can put guidelines at a high level without imposing what tools to use. And I think that's what often happens is people go use this version of this Copilot as opposed to that version. But right now, things are they're just changing too quickly. We don't know what's the best one for our environment. In fact, one LLM is way better for coding and another is way better for dealing with large documents. So who am I to say everybody in this organization use this version as opposed to that version, because we all have different jobs, right? So we find that finding a sensible way to allow experimentation within departments, right? So rather than going, everybody do this, keep things department level and go, for that department, you're going to do this, but make sure you follow these guidelines. We find that tends to increase the utility. And then over time, you'll find your midpoint, right? You'll find your equilibrium to go, guys, okay, this is where we are now. We think these two are where we're going to settle because it covers the finance use cases to the HR, to the coding use cases, et cetera, and that's how we're going to do it. And I think that way, that's how you can optimize the spend and increase the value that you get from these tools.
Yeah. Well, let's maybe talk a little bit there around the guardrails, because I think, as you say, the risk department's going to want to make sure that nothing gets broken. There's data privacy protection considerations, obviously ethics, etc., that comes in as well. But what you're kind of advocating for is allow people to experiment, allow them to kind of use it for themselves, but put some very clear guardrails and guidelines in place so that it doesn't kind of shoot off and all of a sudden, all the company's customer private data, et cetera, has been used, and where did that come from, et cetera. So is that kind of what you're advocating? Let the people experiment, let them kind of find how they want to use it, but make sure that there's some fairly good guidelines.
Correct. Spot on. And I'll give you an example of how we do it in Altron. Is we have a group-wide AI ethics policy. And before you embark on any project, you go through that checklist. You make sure that you've met all the requirements, where the data is stored. So you've checked all of that. You bring it up, we acknowledge it, we go, right, you are committing that you are going to make sure all of these guardrails are met, POPIA and the like, and then we let you go. because you are now accountable, right? And if something goes wrong, you are the accountable person. And I know that might sound punitive, but it's actually not. It's actually really empowering. People are way more clever than we give them credit for. And once they know what's at stake, people tend to, really hone in on what's really important and will give them value, as opposed to this open, kind of exploration that doesn't give any outcomes. So that's how we do it. And so we don't impose tools, right? We don't go, you shall use 1, 2, 3. You shall not use 1, 2, 3. We go, as long as these guidelines are met, go ahead. It's in your budget. If it fits within your budget, go do it, right? There will come a time, most probably in the future, where we go, we're settling on this, but now is not the time. It's just far too early. I, as a user, right? I think I'm a mid-level user of kind of LLMs in terms of prompting, and I use probably 4 on a daily basis, and I often get one output from one of them, and I go, okay. I ask another one to check the output and go, yeah, okay, maybe that's quite accurate. And in that way, you kind of reduce the errors that you might get, right? That's how I use it. So if the company said you shall use 1, then I lose all of that immediately, right?
Yeah. So I suppose there the opposite is kind of true. The guardrails are not there to scare people. It's kind of there to give them a sense of safety, that they can go and play around with this. You've kind of understand the risks, etc. I guess it's teaching someone to ride a bike. You're not going to just put them on a big mountain bike. You're going to give a kid training wheels or a balance bike to start off, get comfortable, and then kind of grow from there.
Correct. Yeah, spot on. And these days, there's privacy preserving tech. So when possible, give people anonymized data, especially when it comes to people, and then let them play in a sandbox environment, because then you reduce the risk of of that data leaking in any way, shape, or form. So that's one of the the requirements, for example, on our side, is like, if it's personal data, make sure it's anonymized, and then you can upload and then go wild, right? Because the risk of anything really going wrong is usually minimized compared to just openly play, right? So it's trying to find that midpoint, and I agree it's really hard. It probably depends on the industry. If you're a bank, you might need to be more tighter, or in financial services. But if you're just looking at retail transactional data, there's really not a lot there that can go wrong. So maybe you relax a little bit more. So I think it's about finding that balance, and I think CROs need to start to apply their minds around what is the right balance for my organization.
Yeah. All right. I'm keeping an eye on the time. This is such a great conversation. I think we could probably go on for another hour or so. But Andy, before we sort of close off, maybe if you can just share some of the use cases that you're seeing for AI, Gen AI within organizations. Obviously, don't need to go into any detail that this is the company and this is how they're using it. But just for the people that are watching this, it's really cool, and I can take minutes and all that sort of thing. But what else can I use it for? What are the other use cases? What are other people doing? Maybe you can share 1 or 2 of those briefly on some of the good use cases that you've seen.
Yeah. Let me give 2 examples. I think one on a business level and one on a more technical level. On a technical level, I think developer productivity is probably it's been the killer app for LLMs, right? And again, we've found that where developers don't adopt the tools, it's generally because someone has forced a tool to them, and it's not something that they naturally find fits their workspace, their workflow, and the like. But yeah, the biggest gain by far is developer productivity. You can do things far quicker now than ever before. Where before I had to go read thousands and thousands of pages of whatever, trying to figure out how to crack this problem. I can really have it summarized to a point where I can make the right decisions, right? And even things like boilerplate, right? Boilerplate takes a lot of time to set up, and if it's not working, then things don't compile. So it is frustrating. But I can set it up now super, super quickly to go, here's the API, this is what I want to do. Give me some high-level boilerplate code that I can use as a basis to then build my app. And I find that is super empowering. There's IDEs like Cursor, that have come out now that are built around this paradigm of creation, where you kind of supercharge the developer productivity. So that's one thing that we're finding. The second one is around business users, and I find that this one depends obviously on the use case that you are looking at, but any kind of recommendation or upselling or value added service to the client is actually been the killer app in a way, right? For, very similar to advertising. The way advertising works is we look at your patterns, your buying patterns, and where you are, and then we can push content towards you. Well, think about that, but reduced to your product environment to go, well, this user is doing 1, 2, 3, especially in a B2C context. So what can we push to you to increase your engagement? Because typically more time on your banking app, it's proven, by the way, more time on your banking app means I buy more lotto tickets, I buy electricity, I do weird things that lead to transaction flow, right? Versus when I'm not engaged. So how do I get the user way more engaged in the application? And I think that is one low-hanging fruit that a lot of businesses can apply without, with very little investment and very little downside as well. So that's what I would recommend, especially in the B2C space. Start with user engagement. Get your users engaged. Let them feel the magic of your product. And I think you'll see some transactions start to increase.
All right, perfect. Andy, before I let you go, I'm going to ask you, what are Andy's top 3 tips for a successful AI implementation? Maybe a little bit of a summary of what you've talked about, but what are those top 3 tips you could share with everyone listening?
One, start small. I know that sounds cliched, but avoid the massive, we're going to change the world overnight kind of projects. That's a fallacy. Everyone is trying to figure it out. We're certainly trying to figure it out for our clients as well, and in partnership with our clients, as we are for ourselves as well, right? As Altron, we're not saying we've got everything completely nailed, but we are moving forward, getting our guys upskilled, etc. The second one is be very careful with cost. The one thing that will kill the hype faster than anyone else is a CFO on the hunt for OI, right? So, so be very careful with cost, contain it very well. Otherwise, it can lead to, that. And then the last one is around, I think just be explorative, be able to explore, don't get stuck in one sort of paradigm and way of thinking. We find that, just changing your mindset and even injecting new skills in your organization would allow you to be able to, see new perspectives and then be able to solve them in a new way.
Awesome. And it's been great chatting to you. I look forward to seeing you at Data Fest in just under a month. I think we've got 3 weeks to go. Hawaiian themed event. It's going to be awesome. It's already sold out. But yeah, thank you so much for chatting with me. And I look forward to seeing you next month in Cape Town.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Cheers.
Cheers.